Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 370, The Power of Spiritual Strategy, Creating a Winning Strategy for Spiritual War. The podcast objectives are reveal the importance of a good offensive strategy in spiritual warfare, reveal how there are only two kingdoms we can serve in this life, and analyze the importance of the power of resisting the spiritual viruses of lawlessness. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. You must go on the offense. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 134 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we completed our analysis of the damage of disobedience within our minds by examining the devastating impact of complacency. In doing so, we came to see how disobedience corrupts every aspect of your thought dimension while executing a complete takeover of your mind. No doubt, this is a devastating loss, which initiates the beginning of the end. To wit, the man or woman who has lost their mind will lose everything in the sure course of time. Therefore, we have no further need to analyze the great peril of disobedience. Quite the contrary. From now, we should shift our focus to the great power we have been given to defeat this spiritual disease once and for all. Enter obedience. Now, I would like to begin our analysis of obedience with an inflection point to set the tone for the remainder of this series. This is one I would ask you to bookmark and to always remember as we analyze the war between obedience and disobedience in our lives. Even though our minds are in a worse position at the conclusion of the cycle of disobedience than the cycle of doubt, we will find our war with disobedience to be much less complicated than our war with doubt. We can see this clearly by employing our example of an enemy nation. Here again, in this scenario, doubt is the invading army, and disobedience is the fatherland. Now, ask yourself the following question. Is it harder to defend yourself against an invading army or to invade an enemy nation? The answer is sure. If all factors are the same, it is much easier to invade an enemy nation than to defend yourself against an invading army. This is why the phrase, the best defense is a good offense, is so popular in many scenarios in life. It's because a good offense can be translated into a good defense, or it can make up for your lack thereof. As the saying goes, you can't win if you can't score. On the other hand, a good defense cannot translate into a good offense. Quite the contrary. nothing can make up for your lack of a good offense. Even the best defense cannot save you in this scenario. Therefore, if you are to win your war with disobedience, you, my friend, must go on the offense. You, my friend, will need to transform yourself into the invading army. You, my friend, will need to become the hunter and turn the tables on the enemy. Show him for once how it feels when the hunter becomes the hunted. And with a potent offensive strategy crafted by the Spirit of Elohim, tear down every stronghold of disobedience he has formed within your mind. The two kingdoms we can serve. Now, it goes without saying that the best way to develop a good offensive strategy is by understanding where your enemy is weak. And as it pertains to disobedience, we must understand what he is really after and why. No doubt, the primary objective of disobedience is to cause you to commit an illicit act of sin. This is why his constituents are noncompliance, nonconformance, and complacency. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. When you commit an elicited act of sin, you become a servant of Satan, and disobedience is the primary degree of lawlessness that is a spiritual factor in every sin you will ever commit. Romans 6:12-18 is revealing. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body, to obey it in its desires. Neither present your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to Elohim as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to Elohim. For sin shall not rule over you. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves servants for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether of sin to death or of obedience to righteousness? But thanks to Elohim that you were servants of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of teaching to which you were entrusted. And having been set free from sin, you became servants of righteousness. Now, there are many takeaways from this powerful passage. First and foremost, it confirms that those who walk in disobedience are servants to Satan. For this cause, your offensive strategy should be founded upon one simple yet powerful objective: you do no sin. This may seem like a difficult enterprise, but I assure you, it is not as difficult as you might think. That is, if you have a good offensive strategy. Along these lines, we understand that disobedience is the source of every illicit act of sin. And thus, we can easily stop sinning if we stop disobeying the commands of Elohim. To wit, if we walk in obedient faith to the Father's will, we cannot sin. For where there is obedience to the law, there is no transgression of the law. The next takeaway you should consider is how Shaul commands us, saying, do not let sin reign in your mortal body, to obey it and its desires. The purpose of this command is sure, and I will offer it as our next inflection point. Man does not possess the power to reign in his own life, and thus we are fated to serve someone or something greater than us, to wit, on the scale of power. Here lies the inflection. Vis-a-vis, there are only two kingdoms we can serve on this wise. We can serve the kingdom of heaven and the force of goodwill, or we can serve the kingdom of darkness and the forces of evil. The power to resist. Now, there are many controversies that ironically stem from this certain reality. And many of them have to do with the fact that the dying nation of Israel has been deceived into believing they will be saved, despite the fact that they are serving Satan. In this regard, they are very much like King Saul. They have been deceived into believing they will get full spiritual credit for an incomplete spiritual work. This is why the Spirit led me to dedicate an entire podcast to the precedence of spiritual mastery. My dear friends, this controversy is the genesis for End Times 363, The Power of Mastery, which was posted on October 28th, 2024. As I said in that podcast, many within the extended nation of Israel are treating their spiritual education like their secular education. To wit, they are not committed to mastery. They don't believe in perfection, and they have not purposed in their hearts to walk in obedient faith to the will of Elohim by guarding all his commands. Quite the contrary, they believe in lawlessness, and their sin will find them out. Remember, a little leaven leavens the entire lump. Brothers and sisters, listen to me, and I will show you a mystery, a revelation, and a warning. And should you heed it, you will be positioned to unlock the power of obedience. When Shaul warned us that a little leaven leavens the entire lump, he wasn't just talking about individuals who are walking in disobedience to the commands of Elohim. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully. He is also talking about assemblies. He is talking about congregations where disobedience is alive. Here lies the inflection, the problem, and the warning. To wit, if disobedience is alive in an assembly, it will eventually spread, and it will infect everyone who does not have the power to resist it. Now, if you look at the spiritual condition of the dying nation of Israel, then you know I'm telling the truth. Just look around. On the spiritual scale of power, the extended nation of Israel is not much different than the church circuit. And we were given the restoration message. Here lies the problem. And I have said this before, vis-a-vis, even though we were given the restoration message, the majority within the extended nation of Israel were unwilling to become doers of the word they were given. Like the former nation, they heard but did not do. And like the former nation of Israel, the spirit of disobedience has run rampant in these last days. For spiritual viruses spread faster and are even deadlier than physical viruses. Consider this, my friends, and be advised. When a spiritual virus spreads in a congregation, everyone will eventually be affected by the virus except for those who are immune to the virus. Listen to me. This depressed reality is why I am investing so much time and emphasis on reigning over the 80 degrees of lawlessness. It is for the following reason, which I suggest you bookmark and never forget. The only way you can become immune to any spiritual virus is by unlocking the degree of holiness that has been designed to eliminate that virus. After which, you must follow all the standards of that degree of holiness to ensure that you are always immune. And this, my friends, is how we reign over lawlessness. Now, although this is a simple matter to understand, I assure you it is not a simple matter to execute. Trust me, spiritual viruses are extremely complex, which is why they are difficult to eliminate. The enemy designed them this way because he is betting on this reality. The complexity of the spiritual virus will either kill you instantly or it will be so hard for you to eliminate, you will eventually give up the fight and succumb to the power and the complexity of the virus. Not only this, but you must also appreciate how spiritual viruses travel in groups of three. For example, despair, distrust, and self reliance. And so you're never really just dealing with the power and complexity of just one virus. My dear friend, you are dealing with the power and complexity of three. Here's another thing you should consider vis-a-vis, like its physical counterpart. A spiritual virus can only grow and multiply in living cells. Ergo, they have little to no impact in the world of physics if they are unable to infect a human host. Therefore, they are constantly looking for someone to infect, to wit, an unsuspecting, unprotected, non-immune being who they can infiltrate. After which, they will begin setting up shop and constructing a vast series of strongholds, i.e., the sources of all spiritual diseases. Heretofore, it is imperative that we not only examine ourselves as we labor to eliminate the 80 degrees of lawlessness, such that we obtain the seal of Elohim. My dear friends, we must also examine the assemblies we are in, those who are laboring among us. We must know what kingdom they are truly fighting for. 1 Thessalonians 5:12 is revealing. But brothers, we beg you to know those who labor among you and are over you in the master and admonish you. Now, here is the final word. The one thing Satan thinks of most is how he can infect a human host. Here again, this infection is not limited to the individual. My dear friends, Satan has moved far beyond destroying individuals and families. Trust me, he is in the business of destroying assemblies, and he is having terrific success. Trust me, the extended nation of Israel has become a melting pot of the 80 degrees of lawlessness, all of which are designed to cause you to disobey. For he who is disobedient in at least one of the commands of Elohim is disobedient in all. This is why it would indeed be a major miracle if you found one assembly where everyone is immune to the spiritual disease of disobedience, which is why joining an assembly of righteousness should be part of your strategy for spiritual war. Trust me, I've seen what happens when men and women remain in assemblies where the people, namely the leaders, are unable to resist the spiritual disease of disobedience. To wit, this fault opens the door for every other degree of lawlessness to run rampant. And thus, this saying is true. When you fail to reign over disobedience, you open the door for all the degrees of lawlessness to reign over you. Brothers and sisters, this is precisely why you must go on the offense. And we will, by showing you how to unlock the power to obey. For this is the only way you will be elected into the renewed nation of Israel. And this is the only way you will stay. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on the word you have heard today. And as always, ask the Father to reveal the truth to you. For the children of Elohim live by conviction. And if he has not convicted you, or if you had not heard him concerning these matters, you should pray until you do. Today, I want you to meditate on the word I have shared. Specifically, I want you to consider all the assemblies you are a part of and or associated with. Then, in the spirit of honesty, I want you to ask the Father if you are in the right place. This doesn't mean that the assembly must be operating in perfection, but it does mean that lawlessness should not be reigning. To wit, the assembly and the people within the assembly should be going on to perfection. This is why you must ask the Spirit to reveal this to you, because it is difficult to know this for a fact by observation alone. You, my friend, need to know what thus saith Yahuwah on these matters. And you, my friend, need to make sure you are indeed in the right place, for this is the last time. And as much as the right assembly has the power to make you, the wrong assembly has the power to break you. It has the power to destroy your destiny. Be advised. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 370, The Power of Spiritual Strategy. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 371, An Intro to Obedience, Part 1. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused. For the end is coming. The end is near.